Hello and welcome. My name is Matthew Newman. I'm a chief correspondent at MLEX, and I'll be your moderator today for the public affairs event 5G for Businesses, Evolution or Revolution. And just a minor housekeeping tip, this event is under Chatham House rule, and as a Chatham House rule, it means that participants from the audience have the ability, but not the obligation to identify themselves. We are very fortunate to have several excellent speakers who can discuss the state of play of the 5G rollout in Europe and to assess the magnitude of changes facing businesses in our society, the growth potential in economic activity enabled by 5G and 6G networks and services is estimated to reach around 3 trillion euros by 2030, according to McKinsey. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of resilient and high-speed communications infrastructure. Teachers, students, researchers, and especially businesses have grown to rely on these essential networks and to reap the rewards of connectivity. But the path to transforming Europe's economy and society is complex. Today's debate will help unravel some of these complexities. We will discuss how businesses and the telecom sector can work together to innovate and fully benefit from 5G innovations. We will also explore how policymakers can foster private investments to achieve the full benefits of 5G, which will provide the basis for a digital and green recovery from the COVID crisis. Finally, we will discuss the role of public investments in complementing private initiatives in the 5G rollout. We are delighted to start the debate with our keynote speaker, Robert Viola, who is Director General of DG Connect at the European Commission. Welcome, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And many thanks for inviting me to this event and to offer me the possibility to say a few words at the beginning of this event. So 5G for business, is it an evolution or revolution? Matthew, you started with something which is very common these days, to start with the consideration that the pandemic has changed our life in many respects, but clearly digitally. There's one thing which is very common when we have this event is to start with this, which is really an important, every time important to stress, but also to start when we connect. Which platform? What is the password? Can you hear me? Can you see me? This is not normal. This is not normal. This is rather primitive, I would say. So it's a bit the test, this pandemic of how savvy is this society overall. Before the pandemic, we were at the verge of having a revolution with AI, 5G everywhere, everything would work perfectly, and we would be seamlessly interacting with even machines. The reality of this pandemic, it's impressive in many respects. The first one, out of this tragedy, we learned that it's still a long journey to get AI at the service of medicine, at the service of the human beings, to be really what we need to prevent, to cure. And this is an investment we must do. There's no other way to have the society more resilient. But also when looking at connectivity and interconnection, we have seen that everybody can be online, but there are different ways of being online. And there are the ins and there are the outs. There are issues. There's clearly a generalized underinvestment when it comes to infrastructure. There's a generalized confusion when it comes to standards and tools. So we have done a jump in terms of being in the digital future. We don't really being prepared for it, as always in the history of mankind. So it is an historical moment, like it is historical that Europe has lined up 2.4 trillion euros. And in digital, the recovery plan, 20% of investment in digital, it's the investment normally we would do in 70 years. So in terms also the signaling, the effort that is being done on digital, this is also unprecedented also from the public point of view. Now, in this context, we were asked by the European Council in October, Commission, you should come up with a kind of what is the journey of the next 10 years. Everyone agrees digital is important, but where we want to go in 2030? And I think it's a very pertinent question because, I mean, this journey into being much more digital is just at the beginning. We all hope that the pandemics will end, but the digitization will not end. And the digitization will influence very profoundly our society and our economy, as we have seen in the last months. That's why we took this exercise very seriously. And last week, we came with our answer to this request, which is the Digital Compass for 2030. This compass is based on 4 pillars. I mean, the north, south, east, and west. I mean, you decide then which cardinal points you want to assign to which. And I start with the people. I mean, the first thing we say is that without education, digital education, without advanced education, Europe will not go very far. And we have indicated a very daring number, which is 20 million of digital experts that are needed in 2030. Europe is more or less at 7 million right now. So this is an impressive acceleration that we need if we want to maintain our competitiveness, which is already largely eroded because we have been late into digital. We want to have a much more diversity and gender parity into this workforce, because today when we look at digital experts, the situation is absolutely not the situation that should be. And we want to make sure that also 80% of the population has the minimum education, which is understand what coding means, understand, I mean, how to use, I mean, basic digital tools, and to make sure that not only we have the peak of the experts, but we have a broader population that really can actually work with digital. Then the second cardinal point, I will leave the infrastructure last. It's not the last, but I mean, for rhetoric purposes today, I will leave it last, is the scaling up of the businesses. And there, I mean, we have 2 little companies that are using artificial intelligence and big data. We have, I mean, clearly many SMEs, especially SMEs, which is the backbone of the European economy, which are not digitized enough. And there we need an impressive acceleration in this. And clearly we want to make sure that in principle, every company, even the low-tech one, in terms of what they produce, but nothing these days is really low-tech, are for sure equipped with the best possible technologies. Of course, we would like to also have some companies that excel. That's why one of the indicators is the number of unicorns in Europe. Then the third element, it's the public administration, or in general public services, including healthcare. And we have kind of forged this idea of public administration in the palm of your hand. So a bit the concept of you should not go and search for public services. This is the traditional image that you go somewhere, you ask for somewhere, you queue for something. I mean, the new concept should be the services are coming to you, and are coming to you into an integrated way, so that you can enjoy security and exchange of information for medical purpose, for administrative purpose, using basically your smart devices. That's a modern administration. That's a modern society. And we want every citizen to have a digitized healthcare record. And we know these days what it means not to have it. We know these days what kind of price we are paying, because we are extremely late in Europe in providing a digital healthcare record for everyone. So this is the third element. And the fourth one, which is, of course, the one that we are looking in this conference, is the infrastructure. Infrastructure means that we have a simple objective for connectivity. We want every European to enjoy a very high-speed connectivity, so gigabit connectivity by 2030, and every populated areas to be covered by 5G. And you might say, wow, it doesn't look that sophisticated. It looks almost obvious. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's not obvious at all. I mean, I'm sure if we stand still and just watch the show eating popcorns, it will never happen. Today, I mean, in both indicators, we are well below 50%. On 5G, we are, I mean, at 25%, even less. On terms of ultra broadband coverage, we are struggling around 40%. Depends how you count the numbers. So there's a long way. So this objective is not trivial at all. It's not trivial politically because if the European Council, the member states will believe in this, it's a commitment to do things. It is a commitment to consider that 5G becomes part of, in the medium to long term, part of the universal service. It means that connectivity, ultra broadband connectivity, becomes part of a vision that if the market fails, we have to do something to make sure that every citizen enjoys connectivity. So it's a political program of very high importance, which of course needs investment. And that's the link with the recovery plan. Especially in countries where connectivity is not at the top, we need absolutely that those countries consider RRF as a unique opportunity to step up. And for 5G, we didn't say that the objective is to actually cash the spectrum. I hear certain countries say, my auction has been a success. Look how many participated, how much money the spectrum generated. Well, I don't find it as an objective of the 2030 for Europe. And there's a reason for it. Our objective is every European should have 5G. That's the objective, is not to make money with the spectrum. And I think that's why I'm saying, an objective that seems trivial. I mean, how much you thought about that everybody should have 5G? No, it's well thought and full of political consequences, full of significance. So I'm really looking forward now to the debate in the European Council, because we'll do a public consultation. Then we will adopt at the end of the year a policy program where things would be owned by Parliament, by Council and ourselves. Because the other thing, which it's a bit of a game changer with this digital decade, we don't want to be or to launch yet another communication of the Commission. We want to make sure that we go into a policy program, which will be a co-decision of Parliament and Council. So if Parliament and Council say, this is our kind of head road, and this is where we want to go with 5G, then this has consequences. This has consequences. It has choices to be made. So that's what I want to say about the 5G targets. The other thing I want to say very quickly is that, of course, with the 5G, with the connectivity, the business models have to change. And one thing we say very clearly into the digital decade, that we see the integration of telecom, cloud, edge nodes, a very important and promising avenue. I think there, the telecom providers have to choose. I mean, they can be happily living being a commodity. I have the impression they always protested about the potential relegation to just commodities, or they can crawl the value chain and integrate telecom services with the cloud, with the connectivity, cloud, edge, data, and artificial intelligence, and move into a much more broad service offering. That's why I started by saying how primitive we are in trying to, set up even an event like this, where we have password and all these kind of things. I think this is an area, integrated services offered on the cloud, where I think telecom companies should not miss the opportunity. And then the last point I want to make is about security. The point about security is the following. If this is the backbone of the society, as we are saying, it has to be secure. Whatever we do in telecommunication, in 5G, it has to be ultra secure. We have to make sure that the best possible assessment of risk is done and all the mitigating measures are taken that our networks are secure. There's no possibility to run an hazard if this is the backbone of our society. We have done common work with the member states, which is the toolbox for 5G security. which has been also taken by European Council, by the leaders of Europe as a reference point, and this must be the reference point. Then, of course, in the upcoming 6G partnership, we look at security of 6G. We look at 5.5G, what it means, I mean, to move to this integration that could be between, I mean, the edge and cloud environment and 5G, and what are the security implications. We have proposed the new directive, the NIS2 directive, where this consideration on supply chains is extended to all critical supply chains. And we have included the telecom networks as being critical elements of the cybersecurity system. So this is a point also when looking at the bright future of 5G, because there will be bright future, this needs to be taken into account. So ladies and gentlemen, I think last week we set the kind of fundamental building block of a very bright future for 5G and in general, I mean, investing in infrastructure. But again, words are words. What now we need is action. We need, first of all, I mean, to make sure that we can leverage as much as possible public investment, but also we need private entrepreneurship. We need to rethink the business model of providing telecom services. And I think, frankly, all of this, it's possible. So I finish my little talk with the words of hopes in the industry. And I find events like this very useful in order to have this forum for reflection about those things. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much, Mr. Viola. That was really quite interesting and captivating to hear your views. It's clear that the European Commission is fully engaged in helping to build 5G ecosystems and to unlock the enormous opportunities of this transformative technology, in particular with public-private initiatives. We're now going to launch into 2 business case presentations. Very excited about these because they're right here in Belgium. So it's something that's not too far away in Antwerp, for example. The first speaker we have is Frank Gullentops. He is the 5G project manager at the German plastic manufacturer Covestro, and he's working on integrating 5G at a new chemical plant in Antwerp. So the floor is now yours, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Okay, so who we are? So Covestro is one of the world's leading polymer producers. We are active in the segments of polyurethanes, polycarbonates, coatings in special adhesives, and also in basic chemicals. Our high-tech materials, they are used for in our modern world, in cars, buildings, electronics, and sports. As a company, we want to become the best of whom we are. We want to drive sustainable growth, and we want to become fully circular. Of course, we want to use advanced digitalization, and within the company, we also want to expand our We Are One culture. Going to the next slide, we have chosen as in a pilot project together with Orange to implement a 5G use case. We call it the augmented field operator. So you can see here an operator in the field using digital devices, tablets, augmented glasses, and having access to all information by just scanning a QR code. For us, it was really a good fit because we are expanding our aniline production at the moment. And by building that new plant, we immediately wanted to bring that facility into the new digital era. Covestro Antwerp is a long stretched site. We have 850 employees, 4 different production units, and in general, we are putting a lot of effort in digitalization. We want to go to a paperless environment where everyone has access to the master documents, not printed out versions that have become obsolete. 5G is for us a new technology, and with focus on safety, cost efficiency, and reliable operations. We are convinced that 5G will help us with the usage of operator-friendly devices. Sometimes same task require different devices in a different environment. You can imagine if there is a lot of rain, it will not work very well with a tablet, as a small example. By using these devices, our people in the field, technicians, operator, they can get remote field support, internal as well as external, due to the reliable guaranteed connection 5G has, low latency, high bandwidth, secure, very secure connectivity. That is what we need in our industry, also with respect to compliance. Prioritized mission control critical communication, we also see as a very big advantage. People are performing their task, but we have mission critical communication due to the slicing capability of 5G. This communication will always be possible. Also very important with the use of the augmented glasses is that our operators and technicians have digital access hands-free during performing their tasks. And it will all improve our efficiency, effectiveness, and we also believe it will bring us to the next level of operational excellence. And the next slide. So what did we learn? We learned that 5G will bring a crucial transformation to the industry, even generating new business opportunities. We learned it's not the next G hype, it's a complete new technology. Engineers were successful in transforming the limitations of 4G into advantages, strengths of 5G. The slicing capability will ensure mission critical communication. Private-wise, we all know the network congestions at the music festival Pukkelpop, for example, or the Brussels terrorist attacks. This will become obsolete in the time. And 5G, having worked in China for more than a decade, I'm very convinced that 5G will be the catalyst for connecting everyone and everything, including machines. Machines will also provide services to us. Now we develop maintenance plans and schedules for machines, but in the future the machines will talk to us. Hey, I need maintenance. 5G, of course, different than other previous technologies, requires dedicated 5G devices and also specific middleware. We were very impressed by the high performance of the augmented hands-free wearable. Can you imagine that what I see, you can see? That is a very big advantage. Needless to say, the advantage, like in difficult situations, for example, the current pandemic. All will improve efficiency, effectiveness, but moreover, safety. So how do we see the future? We see that digitalization is one of the strategic pillars for growth at Covestro, and we are sure that 5G will be a leverage for our employees to fully focus on innovation and improvement potentials. And by the cooperation with Orange, we are very thankful that they invited us to participate in this pilot project in the Port of Antwerp, because Orange really succeeded in setting up a community and fostering experience exchange and learning us about a new technology. They even looked with us at different angles for improvement potentials. They did not save on resources or efforts to help the community in the development of the use cases. So the big message is, of course, very big thank you to the Orange team and also to the Covestro team. And co-creation brings innovation. I think that is a very big message. We cannot do it alone. By working together, we can invest in the future and harvest later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting to see and hear from an actual company that's using this technology right now, preventing pop fans like at Pukopop from disrupting the inspection of pipes and things on industrial plants. So it's very useful. Very happy to hear that. And now we're going to hear another interesting use case, and this one is flying a little bit more above our heads. It's Michael Shamim. He's the CEO of Helicus, and Helicus is a Belgian startup that is developing a platform for the delivery of medical supplies via drones. And he'll tell us all about how 5G is being integrated into his company. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Matthew, for the kind introduction. I think you can see my first slide. I don't see them myself. So it's an introduction of basically what Helicus is. We are indeed, since 5 years now, let's say, incorporated with a single aim to obtain medical drone transport, to have deliveries of medical items by drone. Here, basically, we'll zoom in on three things. First of all, the use case that underlies this concept. Why do we need actually to transport medical items by drone? Secondly, what kind of an integrated solution is actually required for that? And finally, because this is zooming in on the, let's say, cellular network infrastructure, why is actually robust connectivity specifically so important for this setup? So if we go to the second slide, there we try to, in one slide, combine and describe the problem definition for which we would need a solution. And basically, it's a matter of demand and supply that should try to be met in actually the drone as a solution. And when you zoom in on the demand side, clearly there's an increasing demand for urgent medical transport. And there are three elements that you could look at. The first one is that, and intuitively, this is very clear, that is that medical and healthcare benefits from a rapid and sometimes emergency type of care. Yeah, you have to be. We often say that, let's say, speed is what really saves lives. So that's one element that of course is a requirement. And on the other hand, we also see that basically the costs of healthcare are increasing dramatically as a percentage of GDP. These days, at European level, we're at like above 10% of GDP is spent on healthcare. And thankfully, with the success of what's available, all the new technologies, they are one of the main drivers of an aging population, right? We are successful in this. At the same time, more things that are possible today were not possible before, and now cost money. And if older people, they have multiple, let's say, illnesses, they can live healthy by using several medicine techniques, but of course, this needs to be paid. And therefore, there is an explosion in cost. There is a trend, an upward trend in the cost base, which is runs higher than the inflation. And therefore, there is let's say, a continuous request from the healthcare sector to obtain more funds. And so we see indeed a growing percentage of healthcare spending per GDP. However, other budgets like pensions, education, even, let's say, defense, are also not capable of just dropping their share of GDP, and therefore the sector themselves have to optimize their own organization. And there is a big movement. One of the only areas that you could improve on is actually to specialize, to basically centralize expensive medical technical functions like laboratories, pharmacies, blood banks, and try to keep this fantastic democratic access that we currently on average enjoy in the European Union to our healthcare care. And this is a centralization trend that, of course, creates some issues, right? Because if you centralize and you move these supporting technical medical units away from where your patients are, from these individual hospitals, where they are now actually in each of them individually present, you create a new traffic requirements. You need to transport whatever you have from these decentral hospitals to these central technical medical functions. And there you come into the third dynamic, traffic congestion. Yeah? So if we would want to solve this increased and fill in this increased amount for transport by the normal traditional routes covered by road transport, you will only increase the current traffic congestion already there. And basically the average, let's say, duration of such a transport and the variance around that average is unacceptable to be able to actually cover the speed requirements of such type of transport. So there is clearly a demand for urgent medical transport that currently is not covered at all. And this is an increasing trend as this wave of centralization is only starting. Yeah? And we see through many all Western countries in Europe, but also in the States, in Japan, and so on, these trends being let's say, appearing. And therefore the question becomes, okay, is there now a new supply alternative? Can the drone, for example, do something? We see there an evolution of drone technology. Things are getting more mature. We have increased battery technology. We have the electronic speed controllers that are improving. We have IT, a major component of this type of digital equipment and network improving. And basically also we start to see a major push from the aviation industry. A lot of, let's say, investment are being done in this area, and the big players are coming onto the scene. So that's one element, the technology. The other element, of course, has to do with legislation. It's not automatically the case that if you have a good solution, you can also apply it and you can set it up in a correct, acceptable, societally acceptable way. And so there, the European Union, in line also with what the US and China are doing, is trying to provide a roadmap of putting those solutions in place. And I've just here mentioned, let's say, the blueprint, European Union blueprint that was created with a certain, let's say, number of dates. And yes, for us in the industry, these are, let's say, it is not fast enough. At the same time, we have a hangar, we have, let's say, a roadmap against which we can hang our developments. So this describes a bit what our use case is. And to zoom in on the next slide on what we actually want to do. So basically, I spoke about the hospitals on the one hand side. Those are the users for services that come, for example, from laboratories, pharmacies, those central medical units. And basically an operating room, you can say, an OR is doing an oncological cancer treatment, and they cut out the cancer. Of course, the less you take out, the better for the patient, because the less functionality you will take out. But of course, you risk of not cutting enough, and you risk having, let's say, cancerous cells at the outside of your, let's say, the tissue that you take out. So basically, that tissue has to be studied immediately and urgently at the pathological lab to confirm that indeed there are no, let's say, remaining cells, bad cells at the outline, so that the operation can be signaled to be able to close the patient up. This is very urgent because it's a very important, let's say, parameter, the length, the duration of your operation linked to the patient outcome, the health of the patient afterwards. Same example can be found in sampling of blood and urine samples in ambulant units that need to be studied at the clinical lab, and in the inverse direction from the central pharmacy, chemotherapy units or blood units from the clinical lab are provided for treatment to ambulant care. So these are a few elements that normally happen on the same hospital, but actually left and right are being pulled apart because the right-hand side is being centralized. And you would say, like, okay, let's solve this by adding more transport, but then you get into the congestive situation, and therefore you need a drone which can fly a straight line, has no traffic lights, It has a lot more space on top than on the road, etc. And how would this now work, right? So what is the network available for that? And then you go to the next slide, where we have here, let's say, the mission execution, and this is a bit turns around a command and control center, right? So someone is responsible for this flight, and on the left hand, so the command and control center on the bottom of the slide operates on the left hand side the flight that goes from the hospital to the right hand side, the crossing the city, to the right hand side of the slide, meaning the lab, right? So if we go to the next slide, you will see that the order is being received in the command and control center to say, like, okay, we have this urgent transport to do, and the command and control center actually passes on this request in the second slide to the air traffic control, and that's basically a use-based service provisioning that is able to, in the next slide, confirm the flight. Okay, yes, you get strategic acceptance of the flight. You can pre-flight now start taking off. In the next slide, we signal that the flight can take off, and that also the drone, and there you have the, let's say, the wireless connection, of course, because the drone is not connected by a wire, and from the base station to the drone gets the signal, you can take off. And the, let's say in the next slide, the cellular system is key here. It's impossible for this type of services to build, again, a full network of private C-band or whatever radio stations to start controlling this. We need to co-use a system that's already in place. So therefore, the 4G, and we see later the specific properties of 5G are critical, are key to make a success out of the flight. If you go to the next slide, you will see that the drone flies over populated areas, of course, because these hospitals, they are where the people are. So automatically, this use case is in a critical area, and therefore we need very robust communications so that we have continuous control of the flight. And in the next slide, we will then arrive at the destination. We will be able to signal to air traffic control, look, the flight has ended. We close this mission, and we will basically finalize this. And it's key that all of these elements are of highest quality. Therefore, Helicus is very concentrated on building an automated and high fidelity command and control center, and acts together with partners, both on the medical field, to have these orders integrated in the system by automatic interfaces, and then collaborates, for example, now in the Port of Antwerp with, mentioned here Orange, because we are collaborating on a project together where we test these things. And why is it now important, if you look, why is it important to move from 4G to 5G? And basically, I've just listed 4 items here in the next slide that actually are key properties that are stepstones, that are a stepstone evolution between 4G and 5G. First of all, reliability. We need dedicated and guaranteed connection for our mission critical flight. Second one is low latency. It's clear that let's say an effective mission control needs to be able to control what's happening, and the speed as which commands are interacted is viable. High bandwidth, because if something happens, we have to be able to open the video channel and be able to actually do visual flight, take over the drone even manually by the operator, which normally monitors the flight, but in emergency could actually also take over the flight. So it's an extra safety net to, for example, our, let's say, founders are all pilots. We are used to fly a drone visually, and this would also be possible with 5G. And finally, there's also the secure connection, another key property of 5G that actually would protect also this fleet of drones, which you would have against malicious intent. So this is also a key element. And that's, thereby I conclude my presentation. Passing on to you, Matthew.
Well, that was fascinating. I can just imagine a fleet of drones flying over Brussels sometime soon. And we all know about the traffic in Brussels, and Belgium in particular I think it usually ranks the worst in the world. So that's something to be proud about for Belgium. So yeah, if you can fly above that, saves lives, because as you said, speed saves lives, and it's crucial for health emergencies. So now we are entering the debate part of the program. We have an hour ahead of us, so a good solid time to discuss all the issues we just heard about. And it's my pleasure, great pleasure, to introduce the other members of the panel. And we also want to be able to ask an important question, and hopefully by the end of the hour we'll have some good answers. So the question is, how crucial is it for the EU economy and society to foster the rollout of 5G in order to enhance the competitiveness of businesses? I think we can everyone on the panel would agree it is very crucial, but we want to hear more details about that. So to discuss this very important issue, we first have Piers O'Donoghue. He's director for the Future Networks Directorate of DG Connect in the European Commission. He's responsible for policy development and research regarding 5G networks, IoT, cloud, and data flows. We have a great pleasure to meet a member of the European Parliament, Susana Solis Perez. She's been at the Parliament since May 2019. She's part of the Renew Group, and she's a member of the Industry, Environment, Regional Development, and Women's Committees. So she's got a full plate of work. And also we have Hilary Mine. She is Head of Strategy and Technology for Nokia Customer Experience, the company's global sales and marketing organization. And finally, Michael Trabia. He is the Orange, or I should say Orange, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. His role is to seize the opportunities presented by upcoming technologies such as AI, data, and 5G. So, Piers, if you want to lead us off with some opening thoughts about that question I just mentioned.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, Roberto's already given a very clear overview, and I can't wait to hear the views of others. But in terms of your top level question, well, we can just say it's very crucial and we can all go home. I think I'd like to put emphasis on three elements. The first is that the business case and the business use, the use by industry and all sectors of the economy, is actually crucial to create the investment incentives for operators and for equipment manufacturers to develop products. Because if we were to sell 5G as another G, more than 4G, that's not going to work. It's not just an enhanced video or media experience that defines what 5G is, or that is going to push anyone to invest in this crucial technology. It's actually the huge advantages that it can give to industry, to all sectors of the economy, not just the tech sectors, to develop new uses, new applications of data, and to really increase their competitiveness, their productivity, and then rolling from that, thirdly, their environmental footprint. And that's actually the second reason for 5G. 5G as a technology, while we have to be very careful about its own footprint in terms of power consumption, can actually drive a whole series of applications which will drive down the climate footprint of many, many sectors, starting with transport and logistics, all the way to agri-food and agriculture, whether it's the use of pesticides or whatever. So those are two key reasons why we need 5G, but why the industry use case has to be at the center of our thinking. Now, this does not mean that we're not thinking of the citizen, that we're not thinking of the end user, because a lot of the applications that we have to work in close partnership with others in the sectors I've mentioned, or many others, will then give rise to significant consumer and citizen benefit, like the health services case, and we've heard a great example now, but also in telemedicine, etc., in terms of transport, in terms of smart cities or rural communities, and the connectivity and the services that are available. And then, of course, looping back again to the climate change, but also improving the environment. So this is the reason why it has not just the services they get into their smart device, but everything around them. That means that this is, in the end of the day, why, as Roberto said, for our digital decade, we really want 5G to cover all of the population in order so that everyone but the service providers that are around them can benefit from 5G. I'll stop there for the moment. Thank you.
Well, that is an excellent overview, Piers. Thank you very much for that. We are very delighted to hear from everybody today, just as some opening statements. So if you would like to go forward, Susanna, if you would like to give us your initial thoughts for that question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Terpin. Thank you for the invitation. And responding to your question, it's crucial. It's crucial because, as Mr. Viola said before, we are at a historical moment now with the upcoming deadline for the national recovery plans, which will lay down the future, the foundations for the recovery of our economy. And it's crucial because I want to talk about it's crucial for our strategic autonomy, for the European strategic autonomy. Because as we said, we don't need to say that the COVID has changed our life, but has also exposed the vulnerabilities of our value chains and our dependency on non-European technologies. And in this sense, one of the most important debates we're having here in the Parliament is how to achieve an open strategic autonomy, understood as the ability of European actors to own a degree of control over strategic technology. And we don't need to say that 5G is a strategic, 5G networks is a strategic critical infrastructure. And it will be a game changer for the competitiveness of the European industries. We have seen the use cases, and it will also play a critical role in healthcare, energy management, transport, smart cities, or agriculture. So that brings me to the second point, is that we are at the moment we are lagging behind the US, and we need to invest. We need to massively invest in the deployment of 5G. And why is we are at a critical moment? Because now we have the recovery plan, and we need to make sure that investments fall behind this priority. And not only we have to talk about the RFF, the recovery plan, but also the cohesion funds, where I was responsible for the ERDF funds, and also we have to make sure that we attract enough private investments to deploy this technology. And I think we can all agree that for once, the European Parliament has shown leadership in this framework, in this MFF, and has pushed to have a new MFF focused on digital transitions and GETS. We also have to invest in cybersecurity, as Mr. Viola said. And my last point is the social aspect of 5G. As politicians, we need to make sure that people are aware of the deep impact that these new technologies will have in our everyday life. We have to guarantee that we don't leave anyone behind. And the first point for this would be to focus on education and skills. Investing in infrastructure will not be enough in our society if our society cannot or does not know how to keep up with the change that 5G will bring. And of course, we have to take into consideration the impact 5G can have in the digital divide, especially in the rural areas. This is why it is so important to use also the cohesion funds to make sure that every citizen, every person has access to connectivity. And finally, and for later, I don't want to, but we have also, we need to talk also about the disinformation campaigns and the relation between health and 5G deployment. And we need to make sure that we address this issue, we have scientific evidence, and because we need to remove all possible barriers for a smooth and safe deployment of 5G. And sometimes in the European Parliament, we spend so much time talking about health issues and not focusing on the real investments and the real efforts we need to do to make this deployment. And that is my initial point.
Susanna, that was excellent. And I think you brought up some of the really important questions that we've already received from some of our listeners, and we will get to them. I'm really interested in what you said about the environment, about health and 5G deployment, the health concerns, the misinformation. We will get to all those questions because those are really crucial in this whole debate, and they can't be ignored. So we're going to just move on to Hilary Mein, just to give her initial thoughts about how important 5G is. Thank you, Hilary.
Thanks so much, Matthew, and thank you for inviting me. So I think I want to make 2 points, and one is I'd like to share. I think it's clear to, as Pierce said, it's very clear that it's critical, and as Susanna said as well. I just want to maybe bring one more thing to think about on the criticality, and then I'd like to talk about how we move forward, because I think that's really the critical piece. But Nokia Bell Labs just published a study called The Big Inversion. And I don't know if we can use the chat feature to share links, but I could share it with you to share it with people later. But it's really, it's quite interesting reading if you get a chance. And the major thesis here is people tend to think of digitalization around companies that are more digital in nature. And if you look at the spend on digitalization, traditional sort of digital companies account for about 70% of investment in digital today, and physical companies, hospitals, manufacturing, ports, et cetera, account for about 30%. But of course, the economy is about 70% represented by physical companies and about 30% by digital companies. And what we're seeing, and COVID has had a role in accelerating this, right? We see a lot of acceleration and push and pull from enterprises today, because in fact, enterprises are very eager and need to make moves. There was a great headline, 5G saved my business, by a company that we work with in Germany that does servicing for airplane parts. And it was literally the case that they had installed 5G just in time before the crisis hit, that they could do their work remotely with video, which would not have worked with Wi-Fi. It's a small example, but we expect to see a dramatic inversion in this ratio of investment. And it is happening around the rest of the world, and it needs, we need to stay competitive in Europe, which means we need to find ways to help our enterprises do the digitalization they need to do, and of course, our government institutions, because that's a critical part for them as well, as we heard from Director General Viola. So this inversion of investment is coming, and we'd like to be at the leading edge, not the back edge of that. I wanted to say that I think I really applaud what Europe is doing so far in terms of the digital compass and in terms of the RRF. But now we need to actually make sure it gets implemented, and that's the hard work. So one, 3 recommendations that we have at Nokia. One is to really ensure that the 20% of the recovery packages foreseen for digital is really used for digital, not only for supporting broadband deployments of digitalization, but also R&D investments. When we talk about having an open strategic autonomy, right? That's part of it, is R&D investments for European companies in key enabling digital technologies. And I would say that that's important, not just to create unicorns in Europe, which is a really important piece, but also to create mid-sized businesses and more, right? We need to support all of our companies. And I think Pierce mentioned SMEs. SMEs are critical if you're really going to achieve digitalization anywhere. SMEs are 60% of any economy normally. Helping them through both skills and digitalization is critical, and using the recovery funds to help with that is important. Second thing is member states need to be pushed hard to provide regulatory incentives for private investment in advanced telecom. So cutting the cost of spectrum, which I think Director General Viola hinted at, cutting red tape for network deployments, avoiding overregulation in AI and so forth are going to be really critical to building this ecosystem, because 5G is much more than just radios. It's an ecosystem of devices, capabilities, services, and so on. And finally, in-country operator consolidation to strengthen telecom operators where it makes sense. This is one of the reasons that we are where we are in Europe relative to other nations and regions. We have fragmentation on national lines and fragmentation around all of Europe, which is much more significant than in other parts of the world. And we may need to address that to economically be competitive. So those are the points I wanted to make. I want to lend some more time to Mikhail, who I really appreciate. Nokia and Orange have also been partnered in several areas. We're rolling out 5G today together in Belgium and Luxembourg, as well as other spots. And very excited to hand over to Mikhail via Matthew.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to say, Hillary, those are excellent points, and we will get to them, particularly the issue about overregulation, cost of spectrum. These are definitely talking points that I hear whenever I get on the phone with an operator, a telecom operator. So we will get to those. Now our final panelist is Michael Trabia, and if you could give us a short overview of your thoughts. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, and it's great to be here with you to discuss about 5G and 5G opportunity. You asked the question, I mean, how 5G is crucial for Europe, and it could seem an obvious question, but actually it is not. We see in more and more European countries, some concerns about technology, about how technology are bringing some progress, are bringing some positive outcome for the population. And I believe it is important that we can address this topic, and we can address this topic towards the citizens, towards the European citizens. And obviously, I do believe 5G will bring a great benefit for European citizens and businesses. But it is not only mentioning, obviously, the economical part, and we know that 5G will bring trillions of sales enabled by 5G in Europe. We know that 5G will create millions of jobs in Europe. We know that 5G is a necessity for the competitiveness of our businesses. We know that 5G will be critical for B2C customers in order to still benefit from very high quality networks. But I think it is also very important to mention how 5G will be able to answer to some very key and I think concerns, societal concerns that are here for everybody. And I would like to mention, obviously, the environment topic that, and there is a very big commitment from Europe to move to the net zero carbon. And as Orange, we also took this commitment as a company to be a net zero carbon by 2040. But also about digital inclusion, that was also mentioned by a member of parliament, but also by Director General Roberto Viola. Those elements are where we need to demonstrate, and I do believe we have a lot of use cases to show that 5G and technology, if we use them properly, can bring key improvements and are necessary to get to our objectives. And for me, this part also of the debate needs to be addressed. And maybe one last comment in this introduction is talking about ecosystem. I mean, we have seen in the use cases that you have demonstrated, and I am very pleased to see them because 6 months ago I was still CEO of Orange Belgium, and I initiated this network test in Antwerp, and I'm very pleased to see that we have real use cases that bring benefits for companies, for healthcare, because at the end of the day, the most innovative thing about 5G is what we'll do with it. So that's really an ecosystem topic. And it's not only about infrastructure. Obviously, infrastructure are very important. And I am, together with Hilary, we are very obviously focused on that part about auction, about permit, about infrastructure rollout. But it's also about services. It's also about device. It's about open innovation. And this is how we will get the benefit of 5G.
Michael, thank you very, very much. That's a great overview of the challenges we face. I'm going to just launch right into a rather meaty, heavy question, and who better to answer a heavy, meaty question than Pierce O'Donoghue, who's got all the facts and fingers at his disposal. So it's about spectrum, and it comes from one of our listeners, and I think this is a common question people come up with talking about 5G. So it's really about the cost of spectrum, the lack of harmonization. A lot of people see this as an impediment for 5G rollout in Europe. And so the question is, why not harmonize in the EU a spectrum bandwidth for local industry, 3.7 to 3.8 megahertz like in Germany, to avoid a patchwork that would provoke extra costs? So Pierce, I hope that you could have an answer for that one.
Well, we have done our work on harmonization. What we don't want to do is over-harmonize, because then we're going to give a very rigid plan to the operators who need to pick and choose what is appropriate for their deployment. But what's behind the question is linked to the industry use cases. So let me just say what I understand as part of the question. In the licensing procedure in Germany, they did reserve a band for what you might call a campus network or a non-site network, particularly for industry. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to that, and the Commission is not going to pick winners. But certainly, we do have an overriding mandate, which is to ensure the efficient use of spectrum. It is a scarce resource. And not in all cases will that be the most efficient use of spectrum. We want that possibility to exist. We're looking with interest at the implementation in Germany, but we're not going to say that in all 27 member states you should reserve maybe even 100 megahertz or more of scarce spectrum to do it. The band that your questioner referred to is, of course, probably the appropriate one. Sort of halfway, in terms of properties, it's halfway between having long distance and broadband and high data bandwidth capacity, and will allow for reuse. And that's critical, that if you do have a company with several production sites, that hopefully you can then have somebody who uses different production sites to use the same spectrum. So there is some spectrum efficiency there. But that allows me just to answer the question. We have harmonized the bands, we've identified the pioneer bands, but we haven't gone so far as to say you must use this part of the band for this specific application. That would not be a good idea, and that would be going too far. But I have to go back to the first point. And Hilary, when you were speaking, I actually smiled and once said that you thought that maybe Roberto had hinted at the issue of charging too much. I don't think Roberto hinted at anything. He is quite blunt when he speaks to the member states about the fact that they are trying to extract maximum revenue, and that is not in their own interest. And member states don't like being told by Brussels bureaucrats that something is not in their own interest. So if we just look at what is likely to happen again, member states, of course, for very understandable reasons, have serious deficits as a result of the COVID pandemic. The easy answer would appear to be, well, let's try and make every single Eurocent we can out of our auctioning spectrum. But in reality, as we've seen from the studies and the growth potential from 5G, if you give away the spectrum for a very low cost, you will facilitate the rapid rollout of 5G services and technologies, and that is what will boost the economy. That is where your recovery and resilience comes from, not from getting a once-off exchequer boost, which quite honestly isn't going to pay for the COVID crisis on its own anyway. So it is a major problem. We already are faced with serious delays. And then I just sort of answer myself again. So we're not going to be more prescriptive about how member states use the spectrum. We are going to insist that they license it now.
Pierce, I think that's an excruciatingly important point about the delays, and also about who's really in charge here. So member states do have full control over their sovereignty, which in terms of their spectrum. And so when you do have these delays, and we're sitting right here in Belgium, and we all know Belgium is one of the lagging countries. They haven't even had an auction yet for 5G spectrum, so that's quite disappointing for a lot of people trying to work here. I'm going to launch into another subject, which I think is important for today's debate, and that's about consolidation in the marketplace. And this is something that Mica Ottavia brought up, and I would like to know from people in the panel. Perhaps we can start with Susanna. How important it is, how crucial it is for the EU to allow more consolidation. And when I'm talking about that, I'm really talking about this network sharing idea. So everyone knows how expensive it is to roll out 5G. Everyone knows that there's possibilities to do network sharing, but also the European Commission has got an antitrust case that's pending in the Czech Republic. Pierce is not responsible for that one, but his colleagues over DG Comp are. Some people complain that this is causing legal uncertainty for network sharing. So I'd like to ask you, Susanna, if you think that this is an impediment for operators, if this needs to be addressed, and Michael, if you want to chip in after she gives her views on that.
Sorry, I'm not expert on these networks consolidation, but what I want to focus is that we need to, as Europe, we need to address this topic, and it could be a possibility that we need to see if the regulation allows this, and of course we should see if it is possible in order to reduce costs. Because as we mentioned before, we cannot make benefits from the member states should not make benefits from the auctions, from the auctions, because we need companies to be sound and to be to have the capacity to invest in the deployment. So I don't dare to say how it will be done, but we need to explore these possibilities. Some countries are doing this in the North countries, and it would be a solution for the IT companies that need to have the solvency to invest in the rollout, which will boost the economy in the end. And we need to make sure that we don't over-regulate and that we pave the way for these companies to do it. But sorry that I cannot be very deeply in this technical aspect.
That's absolutely fine. We're not experts on everything. So we can hear from Mica Ottavia and maybe Hilary, if you want to join in as from an operator's point of view, it would be really interesting to hear from you as well.
Yes, thank you. That's very interesting topic, and I don't want to put anyone uncomfortable here. Obviously, sometimes you tend to oppose the consumer and the competition law. I do believe that this is we certainly can bring a solution to both, and it is out of the question to penalize the European consumers. And I think we all know that in Europe we have great offers, we have great telecom packages, we have great prices, we have great competition, and I think nobody wants to come back on that. Not mentioning also the roaming, the international call. All of this has brought a number of benefits to the European consumers. Obviously, it has not always been easy for telco to cope with that, but we have done, and I think it's something that is positive. Now we all know and we all say the same thing. We need 5G. 5G will be critical for the companies. 5G will be critical for the end users. But it is costly. How do we encourage, how do we make sure that there will be 5G everywhere for everybody with all the technologies also associated, edge computing, artificial intelligence, that will be used to bring really the full benefit for businesses in Europe to be competitive. Network sharing is indeed a great solution to that, and you have this kind of deals in a number of countries in Europe. I personally signed myself a network RAN sharing deal between Orange Belgium and Proximus that is being implemented now. This is critical because we need to put money where it matters for the customers. We need to put money where it matters for the businesses, obviously respecting the competition directive. But I think we need clarity, and this is something we I think is important and that should be given by, and I'm asking and I'm taking the opportunity, even if I know it is not on Pierre's shoulders, but I take advantage of your presence to also make this call. We need legal certainty on what we can do there, because there are hundreds of millions of euros at stake, $1 billion of euros at stake at European level, and we are investing for years. Mobile networks is more than 10 years. It's huge investment, and today we have those deals. We don't know if at some point of time we will have some issue or not, on what ground, and this is an issue. So we need clarity, and in my own opinion, humble opinion, we should favor network sharing, because this is an opportunity to bring both, I would say, savings in order to invest more to bring 5G faster in the countries, while preserving obviously competition that is also very important for all of us.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring Hillary in if she wants to add a couple words to this, and then I'll give Pierce a right to response there, since a lot of criticism directed to the Commission.
Thanks. I'm not sure it's criticism. I think it's friendly suggestions for what we need to do to be able to accelerate. I think there are a few other things that are important as well. So when you think about the cost of rolling out isn't the network equipment. We make money on it, but it's not that much of it, right? A lot of it is around and a lot of the time is related with permitting processes. It's related to getting access to the right physical infrastructure for sites. So there are a whole lot of things that we can do in addition to sharing networks that can make the rollout a bit faster. So the sharing of networks, I agree. I think I have been running Nordics, Baltics, and Benelux for Nokia until recently, and I can tell you in the region I was running, there are 5 shared networks that we're building 5G for at the moment in Baltics, in Nordics, and in Benelux. And it's a trend that we see worldwide, and it's a trend that does enable people to move faster and to get the cost into the right place. So it's certainly one option. I think the other thing is we have a lot of very small countries where economically it may be very difficult if you're, and in some cases these countries may or may not have the economic capability to support multiple operators at very low ARPU. So I think we just need to think about how we ensure that that all Europeans have the right access, and it may require subsidies, it may require allowing different kinds of competition, but I think that's the other piece we need to take into account. And then finally, I fully agree with Mikhail. Clarity around your investments and is absolutely paramount. If you can't build a business case for your board for private investors, it's hopeless. So that part is really important. But I do think there are a whole bunch of other things we can do collectively to accelerate rollouts as well, not just network sharing.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Just to remind everyone what ARPU is.
Sorry. Average revenue
per user. Yeah. So it's a critical element for any telecom company, because if you don't have that revenue, you just don't have a business case for investing in 5G. And we have heard operators say, well, if there's no business case, we're just not going to invest. Piers, on to you, because okay, it may not be criticism, but maybe friendly suggestions. I know from personal experience, not that I've been investigated, but I've been following antitrust investigations for many years. They do last for many years. And during that time, businesses don't really have the kind of clarity that they might seek in terms of network sharing. There have been some deals approved, particularly about base antenna sharing, so that's good. But when it comes to some of the core networks, there's some big question marks. So, Piers, if you have any thoughts on that, that'd be great.
Well, thank you. Yes. First of all, we're dealing with two issues, both of which are important, but we wouldn't want to mix them up. One is the consolidation in the national markets, which was raised in your question, first of all. And there, of course, I mean, there is no dogma on the number of operators, although, of course, we have seen national competition authorities and national regulators also taking very strong views at times. But you know, we do have examples, recent examples, like the acquisition of Tele2 by T-Mobile in the Netherlands, which did reduce the number of operators in that market. So clearly there is a way through. It's not always the case. And the other point, the dimension I would add, because we are talking about European ambitions, is that there are no barriers at all to cross-border consolidation. And yes, Europe does need champions. And whether it's the sponsor of this event or just a small handful of other operators, we are clear that they can play a role across Europe in being champions globally. So that's something which, you know, is not blocked by European law. But the network sharing is actually, shall we say, closer to my heart because it is crucial for the rollout of 5G. And we do see trends, and we do see, in relation to instruments that the Commission has now been given under the regulatory framework that has been in force for a year and a half now, the code, that even though we perhaps don't have many working examples yet, we do have, with regard to the provisions on ultra-high-speed networks, etc., much greater leeway for the Commission, but more importantly for national regulators, to allow this kind of cooperation in order to ensure that very high-speed networks are rolled out across the territory and to all sectors. And that's crucial. And we followed up. We had the connectivity recommendation where we do actually encourage member states to provide for the possibility of sharing, particularly when they authorize the use of spectrum. So we are in a generational shift. I'm not at all surprised, nor do I reject the criticism or the critical position taken by operators. I think that they also understand the role that the Commission has to play. But then I go back at the end to what I said. For 5G, given the investments required, but given also the nature of networks, we can see already that there will be a strong case for network sharing, particularly the passive elements. And it's also because there will all be other disruptors coming into the market, and we would not want a discrimination. So if we have the use of edge computing and non-telco, but even non-EU companies coming in with a significant cash reserve, who are able to start establishing edge nodes, etc., which completely disrupts a highly regulated industry's way of doing business, well, then that is in itself discrimination and anti-competitive, and we would not want to find ourselves in that position. So the Commission is really alive to that, and we will continue to work with industry to ensure that as 5G is rolled out, that the existing players who have invested so much, who have a network which can serve as the basis for so much of our 5G and beyond, that they are in a position to use that to its full benefit.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's a very good point to understand that there are multiple elements to this, and it's not easy. It's highly complex when we're talking about consolidation. We're going to turn to another very important point with 5G, and that's safety, security, the environment, and cybersecurity. So these issues were brought up by Susanna, and very much rightly so. And I want to ask a question about something that happened during the pandemic. And this is really important for kind of the public image of 5G. So there was rampant disinformation about health scares with 5G to such an extent that you actually had masts that were set alight across Europe, masts in the UK and the Netherlands. Nobody was injured, thankfully, but some valuable equipment was burnt down, and this was very unfortunate because there's absolutely no kind of evidence that there's any kind of health risk with 5G. So I would like to turn to Susanna. Maybe she's thought about this a bit on how to confront that, and then maybe we can hear from some of from Michael and also from Frank to say a little bit about how important it is to have safety and security with these networks. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Because as I mentioned, I don't want to talk about the potential negative aspects of this technology, but whenever in the parliament we have a discussion about 5G, it always arises this question, no, about these campaigns, or disinformation campaigns. Not only some people, but also some part of the scientific community are worried about the antennas, about the electromagnetic exposure, and the risks for the people. So what I always ask is to have an independent scientific assessment, because we need to counter-argument. A counter-argument is this. And I know that the Commission has recently published a study which was quite clear, but maybe my proposal would be to have an independent study about the potential health issues, because in order to assure that we have then a smooth deployment of the 5G technology. It is not a nonsense. It is always something that is important, and we have to make sure that we don't have any cybersecurity issues, and also to make sure that the health and of our citizens is safe. So it is something we need to address, and it is important, although you don't think it is, because my concern is that we need to focus on the deployment of this technology, on business cases, on how to make sure the SMEs, the entrepreneurs can uptake the technology. And it always arises this issue whenever we talk about artificial intelligence or whatever other technology. So it is important for us.
I completely agree. This is an essential question. It always comes up. It's one of these things that it's unavoidable when you talk about 5G, and no matter how much people explain it, they still are rather skeptical. So, Michael, why don't you start off a little bit of discussing your view on safety issues, environmental issues, security issues, how important that is to have a full rollout of 5G?
Yes, thanks. Actually, these are good questions, and I think we need to be able to answer to those questions. And I just want to say that when you live in a continent in Europe, which is quite, I would say, advanced in terms of economy, in terms of wealth, but maybe growing at a slower pace than other regions, people tend to be afraid. They are afraid of what they could lose, of what could happen, and I believe probably in Europe you have more fear about technology that you may have, and what we can see in other continents, for instance, in Asia or in the US. That's very different. Nevertheless, the questions are good, and we cannot just ignore them. And it is very important to take the time to discuss the topic openly, transparently, with indeed independent commission and reports on those topics. But it is also very important to refuse disinformation. We see this more and more growing. And we all around the table, I think, are perfectly aware that 5G is not causing COVID, that we are not implanting some chipsets in the vaccine that will be able to control people via 5G. But these topics we can laugh about it, but this is circulating, and this leads to a number of people that getting to extreme actions, and we see that in a number of countries. And I can tell you that in France there are a number of arsons against networks, and this is very critical because the networks are vital for the economy, they are vital for the people, and when you do that, you put people's life in danger, because one thing is demonstrated is that the networks, the mobile, save lives every day, because it allows to alert the safety, when there is an accident, you can. So this is just a reality, and I think it's very important both to answer openly and transparently with all the information available, with the scientific vision, and we have seen that in France, for instance, where there has been a lot of debates in cities, and I know in Belgium also it has been the case, but 5G has not been launched yet. In cities where you have newly elected mayors, for instance, that have requested, okay, maybe we should pause, we should wait before we are able to launch. We have a lot of discussion, a lot of transparency with the citizens, open discussion, and now this has allowed the debate to be much more peaceful, and the rollout of 5G is now going quite smoothly. Now that this period of time, with a few months, we have taken the time to explain, to answer all these questions. So I would say both transparency, that is absolutely key, but also we need also to be all together to fight against disinformation and violent actions that put in danger people's lives.
Yeah, it's a really good point. At the Commission, they're also working on disinformation for other kinds of things, like political disinformation, hate speech, and those are policy things that are being proposed right now. I would like to get the point of view of some of the use case examples that we had earlier today, and get their point of view on security and even cybersecurity questions with 5G and the importance of safety. Why don't we start with Mr. Shamim, if you can talk a little bit about the importance of security and safety with what you're doing every day.
Well, this clearly is a series of topics, by the way, that are key to our use cases, right? So if you want to have a service in place that healthcare can, let's say, build upon, it has to be robust, right? This is about trusting medical activities on a logistic chain. And if an uptime is absolutely critical, the all issues that lead to downtime should be mitigated. And let's say the cyber, whether it's intentional or not intentional, right? So intentional risks to such a supply chain are indeed elements that can be caused by cyber criminality. And for that, and that's also a point that I also mentioned in the presentation, is a key topic for us, and we should really address it and give it strong concerns. The second point, let's say the inadvertent elements that need to be covered by quality, right, of the solution. And quality is often the result of, let's say, clear standards, clear harmonization between, let's say, applications. Therefore, for example, Hercules is not focused on a single European country. We collaborate in European projects, integrating various drone platforms in our command and control center software, for example, so that we also can cover multiple use cases, but also in different countries. Today we are collaborating in 5 countries, Western European countries, to have, let's say, thoroughly tested processes, and that's all based on standards. And elements like 5G provide us with such a standardized component that we can say, like, look, this, if it's available across Europe, then we know that this component is, in a similar way supporting our inherent quality. And then finally, Matthew, you mentioned ecology. It's clear that for us in this case, I mean, a key point of what we achieve is we actually reduce the further increase of road, let's say, traffic blockages, and the more that traffic stands still, of course, the more or the worse that is for the ecology. So our fully digital and electrified solutions are, if also production, of course, of energy is ecological, form a fully, let's say, closed loop with an ecologically friendly future. So that might be a few comments.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you very much, Mr. Chamine. Frank, do you have any ideas? You're literally in front of very complex chemical processes every day. How important is safety, security? If you can touch on cybersecurity issues as well. And I do want to get into the environmental impact of 5G and energy use. Perhaps we can talk, have a question to Piers on that. There is a bigger impact on the environment with some energy consumption with 5G. But yeah, if you can kick off, Frank, with some of the security issues.
Yes, of course. I think as a chemical company, for us, the topics like antitrust and compliance are very important. So the network that we want to use, if we imagine we want to steer in the near future our processes with devices from in the field, even access to our control systems. So it's very important that all this data transfer is in a very secure way. But mentioning said that 5G is a complete different technology, I think for both security and environment, it's very appropriate to get the right training. Also with respect to health, we learned, Orange provided experts, naming Professor Van den Bos from the KUL in Leuven, and then it would be a too long story to explain all the detail, but then you realize that 5G is not more harmful than 4G or 3G or 2G. So I think that is very important that we get that awareness. Yeah, you can imagine in a chemical industry with respect to security, if we are going to implement 5G sensors that are going to steer actors in a chemical process, this must be secure. If no, we face disasters. So that is that's quite important. And we also then learned that 5G, the huge advantage of 5G, that is that 5G is really safe in the core, different than other technologies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn back to Piers. I think he's got his finger on the pulse as well for some of these security issues, but also I do want to ask him, because we only have about 10 minutes left, the burning question for I think everyone on the panel and a lot of our audience is really what can be done to speed up deployment of 5G. So we talked about antitrust, legal uncertainty. We talked about harmonization of bandwidth spectrum, but there's bound to be other ideas from the Commission on how to really get things rolling, because the numbers are really quite grim. I just wanted to quote one number from Etno that I saw when in preparing for this. So this is at the end of September, by the way. So 24% take up of the population has access to 5G in Europe. And if you compare that to the United States, it's 76%. And then in South Korea, it's 93%. So there's a long way to go. We all acknowledge that. But Piers, maybe you can sort of put us on maybe a higher note towards the end of the debate on how to actually get there.
Okay, well, so much for me to deal with. I'll try to be very brief because I would start by answering just one point on the EMF and the health issue. We take it very seriously, and as we've heard from Susanna, the European Parliament takes it very seriously and quite rightly acts as sort of an independent guardian to make sure that the Commission is doing its job properly and the Member States. So we're not helped for rollout, what you've just asked me for, but we're not actually helped when we want to ensure that we focus on public health if we have the sort of disinformation that we've seen. So some of the radio antennas that were burned were of course, they weren't 5G equipment. It was 4G equipment that was being vandalized. But it's that level of disinformation which has an impact then on public acceptance. So we are having difficulty. People have given the example of Belgium, but it's elsewhere, of local authorities sensitive to public opinion being afraid to award licenses just for people to put antennas on some roofs. And we have to make it easier for that to happen. So we have now a legal framework where antennas below a certain power rate should not be subject to the same detailed planning permission. But then to finish on the EMF on the health, just a year ago, I mean, the internationally recognized independent body of scientists who set the exposure standards. It's got the lovely name of ICNIRP, but it is recognized by the WHO to be the expert body. They updated their analysis to take account of 5G and showed that it is not, as has been said, more dangerous than others. But more importantly then, from a technologist point of view, if we have rapid rollout of 5G, then we can quickly turn off 2G and hopefully then soon 3G. And they actually use a lot more power and have more stronger beams. They don't have beams, stronger signals than 5G. Whereas 5G is, it's lower range and there's more dedicated beam forming, which actually reduces the EMF exposure. Then on to the cybersecurity. That is a critical issue. Roberto referred to it as his last major point. And he deliberately ended on that because it is what it provides. As we've seen in the 5G cybersecurity toolbox discussion, because 5G is going to be critical to the operation of the economy, and that is not an exaggeration and it is not hyperbole, it's going to be critical for the entire economy. It has to therefore meet the highest levels of security. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, why we have to be very careful about new actors in the market as well. But that's another point. However, on this, 5G does allow us to secure the entire core and then allows the introduction of a greater level of coding and of masking of signal, which is critical for a lot of the sensitive data that's being passed over the networks. So that is another incentive for everybody, industry and member states, to roll out 5G. And now your last question. But I needed to say those points because they're all critical factors. First of all, we need to look at the investment proposition. And it was mentioned by several speakers, and it's very important that with the once-off opportunity of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, but with the new Digital Europe programme and other investment vehicles under the new multi-annual financial framework, we are giving ourselves the instruments to actually focus investment on those areas where it would otherwise be unavailable or there would be very difficult market conditions for the industry to invest on their own. Clearly, we want to use that sensibly, and we want to use it in a way that actually encourages investors, not the telcos, but the financial market that they rely on, that they can make a strong case that the risk factor is less and that it is, as it were, a sure bet insofar as that exists. So investment is critical, and that is our focus right now. It is using the ORF money for the national segments of 5G corridors, for the interconnection that is essential, that we have these European networks, and also then rolling out the Digital Europe programme. Linking it to our work on cloud and edge computing, because that is where the future and the telcos involved in the telco edge projects are at the leading edge of helping us to develop the more advanced form of edge computing, which is essential when you put it together with 5G. And then lastly, it is where not on 5G, not on telco, but on actually climate and environment, where we can actually start punishing those who do not want to play ball, because we know that the key operators in Europe actually do want to use this to lower telco's footprint and to lower the footprint of the sectors that they are working on. And that is where more investment opportunities come in. Because as you know, even if we're getting 20% of the RRF on digital, 30% of it is going on environmental and climate change projects. And there is a significant overlap between digital and green there. And one of them is ensuring that we have efficient, environmentally friendly networks and services that can actually improve not just this industry, but across the board. So those are a series of one-off incentives that we have. The time is now. And I would just say, by finishing, I'm not going to get into the usual sort of bragging match as to who's first or not. But I started off with my very first point. And this seminar, I think you must have done it deliberately, is about the industry use cases. Yes, we're lagging behind other places. Yes, we're lagging behind Korea, where everybody is getting the fastest possible videos they could want and probably don't need on their smartphones. But that's not what 5G is about. Yes, in America, people are getting wireless access through 5G to their homes to replace cable in rural areas. But that is not what 5G is about. We want fiber to the home in Europe and 5G working on top of that. So in terms of the industry use cases, that's where Europe is in the lead. Most of our research under the 5GPP has pushed a lot of these industrial use cases. We have an industrial advantage and we need to drive that home, because that is actually what will pull the mass demand for 5G. So sorry, I could go on for another half an hour, but it's not fair on the others. So thank you.
I do feel like we probably need a lot more time. Unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left. We can't have a discussion of 5G without mentioning Open RAN. I'd like to just end with that, if I can. Michael, if you could just give us a little bit of a flavor for what Open RAN is all about and whether or not it's going to be instrumental in helping to speed up the rollout of 5G. Why is it so important? And maybe you can talk a little bit about this agreement in late January with the 4 operators in developing Open RAN. And then, unfortunately, we will have to wrap it up after that. So please be quick.
Thank you, Matthew. I will be very quick. Yes, indeed, we support, together with the main telcos in Europe, namely Dutch Telecom, Vodafone, Telefonica, and Telecom Italia, that have joined also this call to support O-RAN, which is the future of the radio access network. And that is basically about virtualization, also about decoupling with open interface within the radio access network. I will not be too much technical, but this will bring flexibility. This will bring obviously efficiency, and this is important for the operators, obviously, but also for the end customers, with an opportunity for new services. And I would say also for the ecosystem, and I'm pleased that Hilary and Nokia support O-RAN, for instance, because we know, and we have been talking about how Europe is lagging behind in certain, I would say in 5G in general, in digital, maybe also in services. We have an opportunity to invest in tomorrow's technology, and we need to be all together, and that's the call we have made, a little bit like the one we have done 30 years ago about GSM. We believe there is an opportunity here to bring strengths together to support O-RAN and to build a European strong ecosystem around O-RAN to avoid to be tomorrow dependent on either Chinese or US technologies only. We need to have our own European ecosystem.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way of wrapping up our talk today. I just want to say that we have answered the question about how crucial 5G is for Europe's recovery, Europe's future. Let's hope that in the next 10 years, all these promises are going to be delivered to us. We've got a good momentum, we've got good companies, we've got good people. We just need to put all these pieces together And I think if today's discussion shows anything, it does show that we have the right attitude and ability to get there. So I'd like to thank everybody, especially our keynote speaker, Mr. Viola, and our representatives from industry and Pierce O'Donoghue for taking the time out of his busy schedule to speak with us. And really would like to a big thank you for all your time and effort today. And yeah, thanks so much for participating. And have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
You all. Bye.